All right, so hey, we just created a new task management REST API from absolutely nothing in about 15 minutes. We have why another video on coding assistants. Well, number one, AI coding assistants have come a long way in the past year, and they're far too powerful for us not to all have them on our tool sets. Number two, when I talk with colleagues, I still detect a hesitation to embrace AI coding assistants for one reason or another, usually due to a perception they have about their flaws. Number three, most of the videos that I come across at least are sort of targeted toward Python developers and a fairly simplistic use case. And we do need those kind of tutorials to introduce folks. However, I think we need to take this to the next level to allow enterprise developers to see how it can fit into their tool sets, into your tool set. And that's why I created this particular video. So we'll get back around to a little bit more of the whys after, but for now I want to dive right into a demo to show you some of the capabilities of one particular coding assistant, Github Copilot. Now I just selected Github Copilot only because it happens to be at the current time the most mature and the most feature-rich coding assistant. I am in no way affiliated with GitHub Copilot or GitHub. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into the demo, and then afterwards we'll kind of wrap back around to what we saw, what the problems are with the coding assistants, and why you really should take the next step if you haven't already in embracing coding assistants. See you in the demo. In the demo, what we're going to do is we're going to start with an empty project. We're going to use Copilot to help us actually create the initial project. And then we're going to ask it to help us create a task API, a REST API for storing and retrieving tasks using Java and the Spring framework. So one of the best ways I could think of to actually show the capabilities of a coding assistant, what you could potentially do with it, is to kind of take a semi-realistic kind of enterprise production app, something that you might actually experience if you're developing enterprise applications with Java and with Spring. So what we're going to do is, it's not quite production ready. That would take probably an entire course, hours and hours of video to really build out a production app. But I think what you're going to see, you'll probably agree that it has elements of a real application, far beyond the typical hello worlds that you see a lot of tutorials show you how to do. So if you look at the screen in the bottom right hand corner, you'll see I have VS Code open. I have GitHub Copilot enabled. That's the icon that you'll see right here in the bottom right hand corner. Copilot status menu shows enabled. And I'm going to start by prompting it. I have an empty project, nothing at all in it, just an empty folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, help us to actually create the initial project skeleton. We describe what we want, which is a REST API based on Java, Spring Boot, and so forth. So we ask it to help us flush that out. So we're asking it to give us the steps right now. So it tells us about using the Spring Initializer extension for VS Code, which I already have installed, and walks us through all of the different steps. So let's go ahead. I'm going to do that. I'm going to speed up the video. And the approach I'm going to take is I'm going to speed up the parts that really are just kind of working, and I'm just kind of going through the motions of whatever Copilot's telling me. And I'm going to strategically stop when there's something I think that is really worthy of sharing, like a lesson to be learned, like do this, don't do that. This is a weakness of the assistant or the backing AI model, that sort of thing. Otherwise, I'm just going to follow exactly what it says. Okay, so it's just generated the Spring Boot Maven project for us, following exactly the instructions that Copilot provided. So the next thing we want to do is, let's see if it can help us actually kind of flush out the structure of our project to the next level. For instance, what are the Java packages that we should create? What are the Java classes and the interfaces and so forth to kind of build this REST API that we want to build? So I'm going to prompt it again in the chat window. And what I'm doing is ask it to look at our entire project so it understands it's a Spring Boot project, etc., and suggest the classes that we need for our REST API. So here's suggesting our layered architecture, just as we asked. A model, repository, service controller. All right, we're going to go speed up forward again, and I'm just going to follow these exact steps. Okay, so I've actually created all the packages and the Java classes that it recommended. So now we just have empty classes. So the next step we're going to do is, well, first of all, there are multiple ways that you can interface with Copilot. One is through this chat window, and this is similar to the way you interface with ChatGPT. One other way is directly in the code editor, where we can actually use it to help us complete our code. So we're going to push it as much as we can. I'm going to stop whenever there's something that is not working correctly, which inevitably there will be something it's not getting right, and we'll have to help it along a little bit. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of proceed, starting with the task class and kind of working my way up through the task repository and the task service and the task controller. Okay, so here I'm just going to place a comment to give it an idea of some of the attributes that I want on the task. And before I proceed with this, what I want to explain is that what I've learned from using coding assistants is that the more context you can give them about the role of a class or some artifact in your project, the better it's going to be able to assist you. So in our particular architecture, the task represents an entity, or basically a domain object to be stored to our repository. So I can actually see here that the coding assistant is guessing that probably from the context of our overall project. So it wants us to import JavaX persistence entity, which I'll do. Now, I said that I would point out when there are certain things that the AI won't get right, and this is one of them. So the reason for this error we're seeing, the IDE says, hey, I can't find javax.persistence.entity, is because the backing model, the AI model that the assistant is using, which is GPT-4, not GPT-4 Turbo, as of this video, was trained only through data up through September of 2021. Since then, the packages, some of the Java packages have been rearranged and renamed. And I happen to know that in this case, the new name is Jakarta. So now notice, I've given it this one hint by fixing it. And now what it's going to do is it picks up on that and it corrects itself, right? Oh, okay, I see, it's Jakarta. And it continues to offer the imports that we're going to need because we have an entity object here. So we have all the imports, and now it's actually suggesting the Spring Boot annotation for entity. All right, so now it's proceeding to provide all of the Spring Data JPA annotations that we need for this task. So I'm going to go forward and speed this up. Moving on to the task repository interface. And you can see it's guessing its role within the system and suggesting all the imports and the Spring annotations. So far, so good. However, we need to extend a specific interface, JPA repository, which again, it helped us autocomplete and correctly guess that we'll be working on the task domain object. So that's it for the repository. Move on up to the task service. Once again, it's guessing the correct Spring stereotype and the annotation for it. And we'll give it a hint, variable to store task repository, and it's creating the code for us to store the task repository and have Spring inject a reference to it. And now it's actually recommending methods for the task service. And the implementations even recognizes it needs to get the task from the task repository. We're going to skip this method for our purpose, and we just want to create a new task. Let's do that. And create a new task through repository. Okay, we'll speed this up. I'm going to fix the missing imports here. Okay, last but not least, we have the controller layer. So, as most of you probably know, that this is the Spring stereotype that handles HTTP requests for us, REST requests in our case. Okay, and again, the assistant has guessed correctly, based on the name, most likely in the context of the project, that this should be a REST controller, and it's importing all of the different Spring packages that it needs. All right, again, this is another sticking point I've noticed, that it gets all of this right, but what it sometimes gets hung up on a little bit is the request mapping that we need. So I will have to coerce it just a bit. And the request mapping is here to define our URI for tasks. And that's not the one I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with just tasks for the purpose of this demo. Okay, fix this import. All right, I'll give it a hint with a comment that I want to have a variable so that I can inject the task service. Variable store task service, and I guess that's what I was going to want. Moves on to create the constructor to allow Spring to inject the task service. Now it will suggest the REST endpoints that I'll want. Didn't quite get that right because there's an annotation that's missing. So I'm going to try to, again, coerce it just a little bit. I'm going to say, instead of method, I'm going to say REST endpoint. That's a bit more specific. Okay, now it's on the right track, including the right annotations. And now it's guessing I'm going to want to create a new task through an endpoint, and creates the post mapping, and that's all we're going to do for the purposes of this demo. Okay, I'm going to fast forward a bit through this, and I'm going to fix some of these missing imports. Okay, so there was one other thing that I wanted to show that I kind of glossed over, and we, for our task, our entity object, we need getters and setters to basically allow us to, well, to get the attribute values and to set the attribute values. So typically now we use, most people, most Java developers I believe, use the project Lombok annotations for that, so that we don't have to, have a get ID, get name, set name, and things like that. So it's already kind of recommending that I import data. I'm just going to give it, I want it to be a little bit more specific, and I'm going to say, hey, Lombok getters and setters, and now it's importing the correct Lombok libraries. And also, by the way, I'm going to need the actual annotations on the class, and it's doing that nicely for me. However, what you'll notice is that the IDE is complaining that I don't find a Java package named Lombok, and that's because when we created the Spring project with Spring Initializer, we didn't include Lombok. We didn't say that we wanted that. So let's see if the assistant can help us fix that missing dependency problem. So the way I'll do that is I'll give it a little hint. I'll just go in with an XML comment on our POM file, and I'll just say Lombok. And it correctly guessed that's what I'm after, is import the Lombok project. And back here, you'll see now that we're nice and happy. All right, so hey, we just created a new task management REST API from absolutely nothing in about 15 minutes. We haven't done unit tests, we haven't done a lot of other things, but bear with me. Let's just make sure that this application runs. Okay, so the application started up without any errors. Another thing that we can use coding assistance for, or at least Copilot for, is to tell us commands to run. So one of the things that we might use it for instance, is, hey, give me a curl command so that I can exercise my REST endpoints here. Okay, let's see if we can get it to create a curl command for us so that we can create a new task. All right, go back to the chat window for Copilot. And this time I'm going to use the at workspace, so I want it to actually pay attention to our project. I'm going to say create a curl command that creates a task in the attributes. I don't care what values it gives at this point. Okay, so it's generated a curl command to create a task with ID1, task name, task task. Let's give that a try. So there's a handy feature here that says, hey, you want me to insert this into your terminal? Let's say, yeah. Let's run this command. See if it's accurate. Okay, we got a good response back. So next step, let's try to do the same thing and ask it to generate a curl command to get all of our current tasks. So curl command to get all tasks. Okay, just like last time, let's say insert this command into the terminal. And sure enough, we get back the one task that we just created with the curl command. So that can be used basically to generate any kind of command that you want, insert it into your terminal if you wish, and run it. So another handy thing is you should always have a README file for all of your projects. Sometimes those things are just a little tedious to write. Wouldn't it be great if Copilot or a coding assistant can actually look at your project and get started at least with a good README file for you in Markdown? So what I'm going to do is try that with at Workspace. Again, asking it to, hey, pay attention to the files in our workspace. So I'm going to say at Workspace, create a README file for the project, describe what the app does, layered pattern it uses, and how to build and run that. So it seems like it did a very nice job for us creating a Markdown formatted README. Describes what the task API is, the attributes of a task, the layered architecture that we've implemented, and how to actually build and run the project. So that's pretty impressive. Now we could basically copy and paste this into a README file for our project. There's one other little thing with Copilot which is a bit different than most of the other coding assistants, and that is that they've actually integrated Copilot into the GitHub command line tool itself, which is not these, right? This is actually GitHub VS Code extensions, or parts of the extension. But I can do something like on the command line, GitHub command line client Copilot, suggest, if you look at help for it, you have the option of either explaining something that you give it or suggesting something. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, Copilot, suggest how can I search this project for files containing the word name. Okay, it asked me a generic shell command. I'm going for a generic shell command. And it's basically saying grep -r minus our name dot, which basically is a recursive search of the array, which is correct. And it allows me to copy the command to the clipboard. Now I can go and exit. And now if I paste what's in my buffer, I have the command. So kind of a nice feature. That's a very basic usage of a very, very powerful feature. That combined with doing the same or similar things in the chat interface, very useful, very powerful. All right, so the last thing, and I'm sure a lot of folks have been wondering, where's the unit testing, right? Especially the TDD folks, the test-driven development folks. Again, this is not a how-to, a tutorial, or any kind of philosophical debate about how you develop software. This is about the features of Copilot and thinking about how coding assistants can be integrated into your workflow, not into this workflow. This is not a completely realistic workflow, of course. But of course, we want unit tests, and we have to have unit tests. So let's just take a look at what it can do for us with unit tests. So if I open up the task service again, and I highlight this method, create task, I can right-click, and I can say generate tests. By the way, I can also go and do /tests in the chat window as well. And now it's generated a test. I'm going to say create the test, create as, and I need to change the directory from main to test. It's suggesting a directory. It does have it in the correct package. And I'm going to say, okay, let's go ahead and create that new test class. So it creates it under test Java com service. So we're good there. I need to fix some imports. Import task repository. Import the task. Import assertion. And voila. Right. Now, whether you think the test is a great test or not, kind of beside the point. I see that some of it really is valid in my opinion. But you can see you can create more. You could ask it to offer more tests. You can ask it to modify this test. But it's a great way to kind of expedite your unit testing as well. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and run it just to prove that it actually does run. Oh, declared package. So the one thing it didn't do when it created the test for us, it did not create the package declaration. That's okay, that's an easy fix. Let's try that one more time. And now we're good. We ran the test. Now there were a handful of other features of Copilot we didn't get to in the demo. For example, we could have asked Copilot to generate documentation for our classes or for our methods. If we ran into an issue, we could have highlighted the code and said, hey, try to fix this. Or explain this section of code that you just generated to me. How does it work? We could have asked it to generate a commit message when we went to commit our code for Git. Lots of other things. It's very important to note here, however, that these are coding assistants. They are not our coding replacements. They are another tool, albeit a very powerful tool in our tool belt. But if you'll notice during the demo, I ran into some issues where my knowledge, my background in Java development and Spring development came into play. And had I not been very familiar with and up to date, basically, on these technologies, then we would have been lost. The assistant would have been no assistant at all to me. So, it is not replacing you, it is another tool. So we've seen a few of the features that are available in coding assistants, specifically Copilot, but other coding assistants have some similar features. But the point is not Copilot. To some degree, my point is not even just coding assistants. My overall point is that we need to embrace the new paradigm, which is AI-assisted coding, AI-assisted work, period. Right? They're not perfect, but a tool does not need to be perfect in order to be very impactful. And if you wait for it to be perfect, you'll be waiting forever and you'll be left way, way behind. So it will increase your productivity, there is no doubt. If someone tells you that it will 10x your productivity in order of magnitude, that's far-fetched. Don't believe it. But they will increase your productivity. But you have to learn to integrate them into your workflow. It takes time, it takes some effort, it's well worth it. The second thing is, say you're trying to learn a new technology. What better way to learn it than clone someone's project, right? Someone who is well respected in the community, and use an AI assistant to explain the code to you, to explain what they're doing, explain their design. Great way to learn, and it beats the heck out of going through tutorial after tutorial after tutorial, most of which might not apply to what you want to learn. Another one is that actually applying these technologies, you're not maybe at the bleeding edge, but you're kind of still at the leading edge, and it shows that you're an innovator, or at least you're not resistant to innovation. But the last one for me, and the biggie, is that there is no way to actually slow this train down. In fact, I'd predict that if it's not already happening by the end of this year, 2024, it will be very rare to find a technical interview where the interviewer is not asking you, so how did you leverage AI yesterday in the work that you were doing? And we all better have a good answer, because I don't think that, well, I'm not embracing it, or I don't believe it's ready for prime time, is going to be an acceptable answer. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and your experiences in the comments below. Also, I would love to hear of any follow-up videos that you'd be interested in. What do you think we need to talk about next? What do we need to cover? What kind of tutorials would be helpful to you? So please do comment. And if you found this video useful, please do like and subscribe below. And I'll see you in the channel.